Hi, and welcome back. It's Module 7. You made it until the very last one. Congratulations. I'm
Yeah,
Dr. Belzer.
I'm Dr. Turner, and it's so good to see you again, and for what will be the last time this
Yes.
week. But keep watching.
Yeah. So we're moving this module. We wanted to take you guys almost as a coda or an epilogue. We've done so much on the two world wars, but obviously history continues after that. So we're going to focus on what went on with women in the military directly beyond 1945.
So we're going to start with perhaps one of the best known examples of women being involved in the military, and that's in Israel, which even today women are still required to do compulsory service in the Israeli military. And so that started as early as 1949. But what's important to realize about that is that even though they were required to be in the military, women were kept out of combat roles. So they did things such as medics, clerks, and it wasn't until much later,
Much more recently.
yeah, much more recently, that a wide variety of combat roles opened up to them.
Yeah. And I love this image. Dr. Turner picked this out because they're in uniform. They look official. It looks like they have a lot more choices than let's think about our World War I women, right? Who really had to fight to even just be volunteers. But as Dr. Turner was pointing out to you before, they still look feminine. There's still a little bit of a smile, the windswept hair.
Yes.
So we've still got some of the old tropes, even with this very new country trying to figure out new ways to incorporate women into the military. So when you guys are reading for this module, again, when we think about women in combat or women in the military, just as we also focus on medical professionals, you're going to read a lot about nurses, especially when we think about the conflicts in Indochina, Vietnam that happened after World War II. So you're going to read about a French nurse, Genevieve de Galard, both her own words and her obituary when she died very recently, framing her, what do we make of the fact that she's there when this French base is overrun in Dien Bien Phu. And so how does she then go back to France and kind of rebuild her life as she's a woman in combat that wasn't supposed to be, right? So how does she navigate that? How does she see herself as a veteran? So you'll be reading about that, and also nurses from America and in the Vietnam War. We have two readings on that, including a woman really grappling with her service for the
Yes. So this is the Buick reading that you will do focuses on this memoir by Linda Van Deventer, and she was a nurse who served in the Vietnam War. This memoir was the basis of a television series in the late 80s and early 90s, kind of MASH-like.
Yeah.
Yes, though MASH, for those of you who are not aware, was based on the Korean War. China Beach was based on the Vietnam War, and particularly this memoir. And so what she's grappling with always is how her service in the Vietnam War was remembered.
Right.
Okay, as a woman who served in a different way, and not as who was in a combat zone but was not
Right.
in a combat role.
Right. Yeah. And I think this whole issue of coming to terms with that, right? How do you do it in a culture, certainly a culture of the 1970s that wasn't really interested in exploring their experiences? So we see that interest maybe peaking in the 1980s. I don't know if you guys have seen this book cover, or maybe you've read this book lying around. It's a big hot read in the last year or two, written by Kristen Hanna, who's a very popular writer. And you could maybe tell by the cover, it's called The Women, and it's about women nurses in Vietnam and the combat and the PTSD and kind of what their lives are like and how they come home, how they struggle with their own family, their own neighbors to be recognized. So I think part of this post-World War II story is, women are seeing combat as they did also in World War I and II, and society's still kind of not really ready to understand it. Maybe the memorials are another way to think about memory.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk
So
about
this is the famously, some of you may have seen this in Washington, D.C. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you check it out when you're there. There was a lot of controversy about it at the time because it's a very unusual war memorial. So this is the Vietnam War Memorial, has about 58,000 names on it.
Of people who died in service.
People, yes.
People who died, the troops who died in service during the war.
During the war. And of those names, 8 belong to women. Okay. And so, yeah, only 8. Now, the next image, which was built a decade later, yeah. A decade later, after women fought in order to have this built. This is the Vietnam Women's War Memorial. I'm actually embarrassed and ashamed to say I didn't even know this existed, and I wouldn't know where it was in Washington,
I think
D.C.
it's situated around nearby on the grounds near.
I think it probably is, but I've been to Washington, D.C. many times.
Yeah, well, next trip.
Next trip, I'll have to go searching for it. But yes.
But I think it's important if you notice, and I know we're not in an art history class, but if you zoom in, you can see it's a woman holding a dying or very wounded soldier, very much in the style that those front two people of a Renaissance sculpture of Virgin Mary, Mother Mary holding Jesus as he comes off the cross, this kind of weak and broken man with a woman protecting. So even though it's again celebrating them doing something new, it's really recalling on some older tropes, I think. But they are in uniform and they are acknowledged. I think that's part of what some of what you read about, some of what they're fighting for. So how do we get into a society as we head into the 70s, 80s, and 90s? You know, how do we visualize literally women? And there's not propaganda posters in the same way there are for World War I and II because media is much more sophisticated and different. But Dr. Turner found some really good examples of recruitment advertisements I think are worth attending to.
Okay, and so this is from 79. It's a US advertisement. And so basically what they're trying to do at this point in time, it's no longer such, a great gig for men to join the army. They're sort of thinking there are better things to do in life, right? And so some of our best men are women. They're trying to recruit more broadly, and so they turn to women. But at the same
very deliberately,
yeah, very deliberately. But at the same time, they can't put women in combat roles or in close combat roles.
I mean, they could. They chose not to. They don't want to.
They don't.
Right. So women are not allowed in the military academies. They're not allowed to be promoted, beyond a certain level because those require combat experience. But they need to make room for them in the army. I think, like, join the people who've joined the army, right? So
yeah, and the other thing is they can take advantage of feminism, right? This idea of this feminism of the 60s and 70s, which has in many ways encouraged a lot more women to seek out opportunities they might not have wanted to seek out in the past, and or made it okay in some ways for women to be, welders, pilots, things like that.
Yeah, Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
Come back. Yeah, it says if there's only one place where opportunity is genuinely equal, it's the army, which is like not true because they're not equal because they can't go into combat. But what they mean is like you have a trade, we'll teach you a trade, we'll get you up to snuff, just like it is happening in the legal world or the medical professions world, right? So the army's trying to figure out how can they walk this fine line of opening up and recruiting more and making a space for all the benefits that women can earn for themselves, but all the ways they can give back to the country without kind of pushing it too far. And it's not just the U.S. that grapples with this; it's all the countries. This is another really great one you found for England.
This one's from the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just love this. As a woman in the army, you'll be expected to cook, clean, and do the dishes. And I mean, note the juxtaposition there, like the woman sitting underneath that.
Cooking in her camo.
Yeah, she's cleaning a gun. So I mean,
yes,
the other
by her satellite dish. Yeah, y'all don't even know what that is.
Satellite dish. This woman's obviously doing some. She's camping out there with making her fire and.
Right.
So no, you won't have to do any of those. I mean, you may have to do those things,
right, but in this new way. So I think again, you're I think in some ways trying to normalize what would it look like if women were in the military, right? So we have the military themselves doing a lot of this recruiting and even as far back, right, at the 70s and 80s. But it really is not till fairly recently. I had AI help me make this chart, which I'm posting also. You can look at it with the readings. Just sort of all of the we would consider sort of Western countries or advanced industrialized countries with big armies. What do they have? And green means they have no restrictions currently on the roles that women can serve. So you can see there's a lot of green. The blue is actually no restrictions and mandatory conscription. So like registering for the draft, which we do not have. And then limited restrictions, still Israel and the Netherlands. So you can take a look at that and obviously do some of your own research to figure out how recent. I think it was only in 2020 that we had sort of the second woman ever, into the Green Berets. The first one got in through a loophole, but what does it mean? And I think even going back to our popular culture, like this image of Demi Moore as G.I. Jane. looking very different than those Israeli women
Yeah.
from 1950. Now we're heading towards the end of the 20th century, and to let women in the military, does it mean they need to be manly, or do they need to be able to carry as much as a man, or like what does it exactly mean? And so this is kind of, I think, some of what society is grappling with as they try to figure out how to make these important changes.
Yes. So I think, yeah, so as you kind of think about this at the end is you know, think about these questions. So think about the ways in which women or individual women adapted to life after wartime service. The readings will really
Yeah.
help with that today or this week or this module, I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah. As you're reading, so yeah, so some of the themes we chose on purpose. So we want you to think about individual stories, right? Because history is just a compilation of individuals, but also in general, right? How women's service has changed. Think back to what you've learned already about World War I and II, and in some ways we do have really new opportunities, in the last historical epoch era.
Yeah, and then finally, this theme of memory and remembrance, because if women were in wars and part of wars, but were not combatants, but they were in combat zones, how do you remember their service?
Right.
Yeah, how do you remember their role in wars?
Yeah. How do they identify themselves? Are they just another veteran? Do they need special um, accommodations or special mention? So how are they remembering their own service and situating it? And then how is society around them? I think you're going to get some good examples of that, especially as you close out the reading. If you read them in the order we have posted, with Sarah Percy again from Perusal from last module. She's going to give us, I think, a really good conclusion about these forgotten warriors and kind of what it means to remember them and mark them and be honest about the contributions that women have made. So we've really enjoyed putting this class together for y'all. We've enjoyed your feedback, transcription projects, and Women Heroes projects, and seeing what you've learned. And we look forward to powering through to the final.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.